I paid for my Miles' 50th birthday party while her children did nothing. However, she banned me at the last minute, so I cancelled everything. I am a 26-year-old female. I've been married to my hubby, 29, for over 3 years. I've always known that my husband's family doesn't particularly like me. My husband has 2 younger twin sisters, 23 female, and a younger brother, 21, who do not seem to like me. This also applies to my mother-in-law. I've never figured out why they dislike me so much, but I was determined to rectify it since I wanted to have a decent relationship with my in-laws. So I decided to prepare for my mother-in-law's 50th birthday celebration this year. My husband urged me against it, stating that if his family does not appear to like me, I should just leave it alone rather than go out of my way to be pleasant and win them over. But I ignored it because I wanted to stay on good terms with them. I'm a people person, and I couldn't handle the thought of these individuals disliking me for no apparent reason. I had to set things right. So, a few days ago, I began preparing the party and even attempted to enlist my husband's siblings. But they were uninterested and informed me that I could handle everything myself if I wanted. I reserved one of my mother-in-law's favorite restaurants, where she and her late husband would frequently go on dates, and paid for all of the food and decor ahead of time. In reality, I oversaw it all myself to ensure that everything met my mother-in-law's taste and standards, as she was very picky about such things. I even invited some of her closest friends and relatives after discussing with my husband about who she wanted there. Essentially, I paid for everything and organized it all on my own, with a little help from my spouse, whereas her own children did nothing to assist and did not even contribute financially. We went to see her yesterday, the day before her birthday, against my husband's objections. When we arrived, we observed that her other children were already there, and they seemed shocked to see us but said nothing. After some small talk, I got to the point and informed her that we'd be expecting her at the restaurant in the evening tomorrow since we had something planned for her. She smiled and thanked my husband, but he informed her that it was all on me and that she should thank me. Her expression deteriorated abruptly, and I was perplexed for a moment. I informed her that I had invited all of her close friends and some of her family members, as well as selected all of her favorite foods, in an attempt to persuade her to notice my efforts. But a hateful expression appeared on her face, and she proceeded to say thanks in the most phony, sugar-coated tone before telling me that, while she appreciated my efforts, she was sorry she would not be able to come. I was astonished and asked her why. She replied that she wanted her 50th birthday to be memorable, so she planned a family-only affair. She stated that she considered her friends to be family, but she did not consider me to be family at all. So she would prefer it if I made myself unavailable the following day. My husband and I were stunned to the core, and I realized in that instant that he had been correct all along. I should never have put forth any effort because she was clearly never going to appreciate anything, ever. My husband's siblings, on the other hand, appeared to be about to bust out laughing any second, which irritated me even more. So I stood up and told her that she could go to hell, and that if she dared to show up tomorrow, I'd have security escort her away. That took the smug expressions off everyone's faces. My mother-in-law said I was frigid and cruel. I immediately laughed in her face, saying that was quite rich coming from her. After some back and forth in which she attempted to persuade me that I was incorrect, I informed her that she did not deserve anything pleasant and that my decision was definitive. She and her children appeared furious. She started crying just before I left, most likely as a last-ditch effort to make me feel horrible, but I didn't care. I was furious. I tried to cancel the reservation while driving home, but it was too late. My husband appeared to be uncomfortable with the situation, but he refused to say anything more than that I did the right thing. When we got home, he went outside for a smoke, which was great with me because he had never been particularly expressive with his family and preferred to keep out of these situations. Furthermore, I had ignored his advice, so it was good of him not to shove it in my face. Anyway, since I'd already paid for the venue and food, I decided to rescind all of the invitations. It was really last minute and annoyed a lot of the visitors, but they were largely my mother-in-law's friends, so I didn't mind. Instead, I invited some of my own pals to make it all worthwhile, as I was very angry by all that had happened. My husband also joined in, and I convinced him to bring a couple of his friends so we could party. We took rid of the decorations just in time before they arrived and had a great time. I posted all of the photos once I returned home today. My sister-in-law texted me, claiming I had spoiled her mother's birthday and that it was really selfish of me to utilize the venue for myself, especially given how much it meant to my mother-in-law. I don't feel very regretful for what I did, and I believe it was absolutely justified. I only hope I'm right. ATA for canceling my mother-in-law's scheduled birthday celebration after she informed me that I was not welcome. Update 1. I informed my husband of the message his sister had sent me and asked whether I should apologize to his family. He answered, "Absolutely not." In fact, he informed me that he'd had enough of their behavior and believed it would be best if we cut them off completely. This was a significant deal because his family relied heavily on him for money and other necessities, particularly my mother-in-law. My husband is relatively wealthy and owns his own business, so cutting him off would force her to rely on her other children. That was a problem because my husband's siblings were unemployed and changed jobs every few months. To be honest, they were all heavily reliant on him for money and other necessities, so this was a major decision. I tried to discourage him from doing so, but he was determined. I am sure there is something deeper going on here. To be honest, I've always seen that as we dated, his family grew increasingly distant from him. He had grown apart from his family by the time we married. It wasn't his fault, since I recall him telling me several times that he would bring his family over for supper while we were dating and even throughout the early days of our marriage. But they would always find an excuse to avoid it. I felt certain that I was also part of the reason. That was another element that drove me to establish a friendship with my in-laws, so that my spouse could reconnect with his family. I'm confident that there is anything my husband isn't or hasn't told me. He isn't the type of person to desert his family. Previously, he told me how important family was to him. So this unexpected decision, while reasonable in light of how my mother-in-law treated me a few days ago, is unusual and out of character for him. I'm determined to get to the bottom of this because I don't want my spouse to be miserable or resentful of me in the future. I'm just hoping he feels comfortable enough to tell me why he took such dramatic measures now. Update 2. After much pestering, my spouse finally spoke up about why he is splitting off his family after all these years. I knew his father died when he was 21, and all of his siblings were in school at the time. His mother had never worked a day in her life, so it was up to him to get to work and be the provider for the family, as the money his father had left him would not be enough to cover everything. He worked hard all day and night. Finally, when he was around 23, he found some investors for his startup, and things began to improve for him. He moved from barely scraping by to flourishing, which was excellent for him. But it made his family extremely lazy and materialistic. They were increasingly reliant on him as he earned more money. But he didn't say anything or complain because he felt obligated to do so, as his father would have expected. They also mistreated his girlfriends, believing that having other people in his life would distract him and that his primary goal should be to care for his family. This is why, when we met and it became evident that I wasn't someone they could simply mistreat and drive away, because I was so desperate to remain with my husband, they were irritated by my very presence and attempted to poison my husband against me. But by then, he'd had enough. During our relationship, there was a lot of fighting and bickering behind my back. His family pushed him to break up with me, but he was determined to marry me. They eventually distanced themselves from him in an attempt to guilt-trip him, but they continued to approach him for money. This strategy likewise failed to separate us. Several years later, we're still going strong. After the whole birthday incident, my husband told me that when his sister contacted me to guilt-trip me, his mother called him to do the same to him. She was trying to emotionally manipulate him into leaving me after I insulted her. That's why he decided he'd had enough and it was time to move on. I'm still shocked that his family put him through this, despite the fact that he was the one who supported them the entire time. I've pretty much lost all respect for them because they're just so greedy. I'm so glad I opted to continue with my husband despite his family's attempts to separate us and drive me away so they could take his money. To be honest, I don't care how much money he has since I love him for who he is, regardless of his monetary balance. Now that I know the whole story, I'm shocked he was able to put up with it all and even keep it a secret from me for so long only to spare my feelings, as I wanted to have a good relationship with my in-laws. But he knew that would never happen. I believe he is making the correct choice right now, and his family deserves to be cut off. They're extremely selfish and greedy, and they show no regard for the one man who has had their back for so long, despite all odds. Update 3. My husband finally phoned his mother and told her that he doesn't want to hear from her or his siblings unless they modify their behavior. He also told them that they would have to find their own source of money because he would not be able to support them indefinitely. As I had predicted, this action was met with outrage on their end. I could hear my mother-in-law yelling at my husband even though his phone was not on loudspeaker. They got into a really vicious quarrel. Because I was in the same room with my spouse, I heard all he said. My mother-in-law clearly attempted to blame me for this. She said that I must have influenced his decision to cut them off somehow. She also accused me of wanting to split their family up. She advised my husband to avoid being manipulated by his wife. Again, the irony of her instructing my husband not to allow himself to be influenced amused me. Naturally, my husband defended me to the best of his ability. He also told her that his siblings should get excellent jobs because they are all adults now, And it's pathetic that they still have to rely on him to care for them. She began accusing my husband of becoming obsessed with the money and power that came with holding such a high-paying career. She said that I was probably urging him to split off his family, which is why he was treating his own blood so harshly. It was textbook manipulation and emotional blackmail to keep him under her control. But now that I knew what she and her other children had been up to, I wasn't going to let it happen again. When things got too hot and I could see my husband becoming agitated and teary-eyed from frustration, I decided to step in. I informed her that my husband's mind was made up. If she and her children don't get in line soon, they will lose my husband's support forever. Now the ball was in their court. They could either behave decently and respect me and my spouse in order to continue to be in our lives. Or they may be the blood-sucking, materialistic a-holes they were and be kicked out of my husband's life completely. Having said that, I hung up and silenced all notifications on my husband's phone so he didn't have to deal with them for a bit and could relax. It's been an hour since the call ended, and we've set aside our phones to watch a movie and distract ourselves for the time being. Update 4. Because pestering my husband and destroying his day wasn't enough, my mother-in-law chose to annoy me instead. After the movie, my spouse decided to finish some pending work, while I checked my phone. My mother-in-law missed several calls and sent me numerous texts stating filthy things. They were filled with curse words from my husband's siblings. I wasn't surprised, though, because this was exactly what I anticipated them to do. I just took screenshots for later and disregarded it. I spent the next 10 minutes responding to business emails and other correspondence. But then my mother-in-law called again, and I mistakenly accepted the call. She then continued to say the most offensive things about me and my upbringing. She described me as a manipulative and greedy gold digger who was out to destroy my husband. I didn't respond to any of her charges and just waited for her to finish it. When she seemed to run out of steam, I informed her that everything she accused me of was something she was also guilty of. So, before pointing fingers, she should probably do some introspection. I also informed her that I was relieved that my husband was finally getting rid of freeloaders like her and her other children, who didn't deserve to even breathe the same air as him. Then I hung up and blocked her and my husband's siblings everywhere I could, making it impossible for them to contact me. It's really terrible that individuals will go to such lengths to avoid having to do any work for themselves. I haven't told my husband about his mother calling me yet since I don't want to stress him out any further. But if this happens again, I will absolutely inform him and ensure that they are permanently removed from our lives. They have no right to interrupt our calm in this way. I'm not sure what they'll do next, but I'm confident that my mother-in-law will not stop. Unless we decide to pursue legal action against her or anything. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, because it would be a terrible emotional experience for my spouse. But if it happens, I'm prepared to see that we see it through. They're definitely not fooling with my spouse anymore. Update 5. It's been about 2 weeks since the last update, and a lot has happened since then. After blocking my mother-in-law, my husband and I ate dinner and went to bed, hoping for some peace and quiet the next day. But the next day, my mother-in-law arrived at our house with her 3 grown children, demanding an explanation for all that had been said and done thus far. She looked upset, as did my husband's siblings. I knew this was going to be really stressful for my spouse. Despite their protests, I chose to remain in the room, claiming that I had no right to be there because this was a family matter and I am not a member of the family. I informed them that they were invading my privacy and were standing under my roof, thus they had no right to tell me whether I could stay or not. Then they started angrily abusing my husband, accusing him of being selfish and unreasonable. They even went so far as to accuse him of leaving his family in order to please his wife. My husband had remained silent and was already hot in the face. So I knew it was my cue to take over. My husband is a very sensitive man, especially when it comes to his family and loved ones, so I knew he would be unable to fight them and defend himself against their false charges and manipulation. That was how tender-hearted and caring he was. And while they were only exploiting him for his money, he honestly and deeply loved his family. So I urged him to calm down and told his family to leave since they were upsetting me. More importantly, they were causing my husband to cry. My mother-in-law began arguing with me, stating that I didn't get to push her around, especially at her son's house, and that she could remain as long as she wanted. She didn't stop talking to my husband, even though he seemed unhappy about everything. It was awful to see how little she cared about her own son's sentiments. What mattered most to her was money. So she began telling him that she had not raised him in this manner and was dismayed that he was prioritizing his wife over his own family. His brother even stated that the only role he should be fulfilling was that of a son and brother because I was a gold digger and did not deserve to have a husband like him in the first place. That irritated me, and I lost my composure. At that moment, I snapped at him and told him what I thought of all of them. They were all lazy, Good-for-nothing fools who relied exclusively on my husband's kindness and charity because they were unable to provide for themselves. They were basically the definition of gold diggers. Furthermore, not only were they continuously hovering around my husband for money, but they had the audacity to be so ungrateful and target him after everything he'd done for them. They were stunned into silence. I could tell they were struggling to fight back but had nothing to say. Taking advantage of this, I ordered them to go before I reported them to the cops for appearing up unexpectedly and refusing to leave. So they left. But my mother-in-law was still certain that she could persuade my husband to choose them over me. She said that if his father had been living today, he would be disappointed with how their eldest son treated them. I thought it was incredibly nasty and despicable to repeatedly use that card to emotionally manipulate my husband. By the time they drove away, I could tell my spouse was barely holding it together. As soon as they departed, he began sobbing uncontrollably, and I spent hours calming him down. I felt bad about the entire situation and regretted that I hadn't tried to offer my mother-in-law a birthday party in the first place. But then again, that's what opened the can of worms. And I am thankful that this occurred sooner rather than later. Anyway, after his family departed, I banned them everywhere, including his phone and social media, and made sure they couldn't contact us online. After he'd calmed down, I told him it was time to start looking into lawyers. I was confident that this would not be the last we heard from his mother and siblings. He agreed because, as much as he hated to admit it, he knew his family was willing to go to any length to acquire money from him. So we started looking for family lawyers simply to be safe. And we were absolutely right to do so. Within days of the fight, my mother-in-law sent us a legal notice. She asked that he pay them a large sum of money as reparation for taking heaps of money from them after his father's death to establish his business. It appalled me that she and her children were prepared to lie about something so important and disparage my spouse. He'd never accepted a single dollar from his father's estate, instead using money he'd earned himself. He was entirely self-made, and stating such a thing was an affront to his character. I was enraged that they dared to spread such a lie. Because my husband's company is rather large, it sparked a lot of interest, which had an impact on his business as well. That was a stupid move on their behalf. However, after over 2 weeks, we were able to verify that they were lying and that none of their assertions were real. So now they're the ones who must pay us a large sum for attempting to discredit us and threaten my husband's job. Last I heard, my mother-in-law and her children had been shunned by the rest of the family due to their nasty little stunt. All 3 of those lazy bastards are trying to find work so that they can pay the bills that my husband has been handling thus far. I'm pleased this is happening to them because they utterly and completely deserve it. We can now move on from this episode and forget about them completely. My spouse and I are very happy now, and I aim to keep it that way forever. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.